Garrett Nussmeier is returning, so how's the portal hunt to fill out the rest of the roster going? Brian Kelly has the latest. It's Locked on LSU. Let's go.
You are Locked on LSU, your daily podcast on the LSU Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Let's get it. It is Locked on LSU, your team every day. I'm your host, Matt Moscona. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free, available wherever you get podcasts, of course, on YouTube as well. So please subscribe. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Tigers hit the practice field on Thursday for their first practice, getting ready for Baylor. Brian Kelly dishes on the Bears and what we might expect on who we might expect to play against Baylor on New Year's Eve. Also, a couple of more portal tidbits for the day. JVR Suggs in the portal. PJ Woodland was, then wasn't. Got the latest for you there. But Brian Kelly and Dave Aranda were both on a conference call organized by the Texas Bowl. This is very customary. So when a bowl game is announced, the two head coaches, normally the day the bowl game is announced or sometimes the day after, hop on a conference call and answer questions about being in the bowl game. And a lot of times it's pleasantries. Oh, we're so excited to be here. We thank the bowl committee. We have so much respect for the opposing team and blah, 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 blah. Well, Brian Kelly on this bowl teleconference had some things to say about Baylor and Dave Aranda and all that stuff, and we'll get to that. But so much of the conversation became about the transfer portal and about NIL and roster building for 2025. Because if we're being very honest with each other, what LSU does over the next month in the transfer portal is dramatically more interesting and more impactful than whatever happens on New Year's Eve at 2:30 in the afternoon in the Texas Bowl against Baylor, in a game that's probably going to have a bunch of opt-outs and that nobody really cares about. So Brian Kelly was asked about how the week is setting up with portal visits. Now, remember, guys are in the portal, but until they sign, can't talk about them. But Brian Kelly was asked about these guys that are currently taking visits. We've told you the names. Will Help, the defensive end from Purdue, Luke Haas, the tight end from Arkansas, and then Poyser, the safety from Jacksonville State, Zachariah Poyser, the safety from Jacksonville State. I blanked there for a minute. Anyway, those are the three that we know are taking visits immediately. Jakeem Jackson's expected to be on campus as well, the cornerback from Florida. So Brian Kelly talked about these the portal visits and how it's shaping up so far.
I was at Gino's, Juban's, and Ruth Chris last night. So I had 3 dinners last night. I'll have 2 to 3 more dinners tonight. It's the busiest that I think I can ever remember in terms of activity. There's a lot going on. We're working on retaining players. We're dealing with the transfer portal. We're dealing with practices. And you can imagine it's quite busy. Our focus right now is, we'll practice tomorrow, but the transfer portal, as I've mentioned, is extremely important to us in building our roster. So that is a prime focus for us right now.
It's by the way, he said Juban's. It's Juban's. And Brian, by the way, it's really easy to say Supper Club. Maybe you should take the recruits there. They do from time to time. Anyway, Supper Club is one of my great partners on my radio show. For those who don't know, check it out. But he's right, and it's so interesting because it's just the change in the calendar now. You go straight from the early signing period, which keep in mind in the last week of the regular season, you're still recruiting right to the very end for that early signing period. Wednesday's the early signing period. And then you immediately the next Monday go into this portal window opening. And now you're hosting portal prospects while trying to get ready for the bowl game. So it is really difficult. But Brian Kelly was also asked about this seeming pivot. And some of you have talked about this, right? Because one of the things that I've said, and I've talked a lot about this, Brian Kelly's been pretty adamant. The way he wants to build his rosters, recruit and develop through the high school ranks and supplement in the portal. So when you lose guys in the portal or early to the draft, or you have deficiencies on your roster, then you go into the portal and you address those deficiencies, but you build the base and the core of your team through high school recruiting and development. Well, it's pretty clear Brian Kelly said this year they're going to be aggressive in the portal, and so far they are doing that. And he was asked if his approach to the portal has changed, if he's had to pivot. Give a listen.
It wasn't a pivot. It was to say that if you want to be successful in major college football, you have to be supported financially now in the portal. And it was really just a call to arms that this is part of the development of a program. We developed our program in one element with the foundation of freshmen. We have a strong freshman developmental program, and now it's time to add to it. And the only way that you can add to it is that if you have, a strong commitment financially. That's where we're at now. That's the reality. And if LSU wants to continue to be part of that conversation, we just need to realize where we're at.
Yes, you have to have a strong commitment financially. By the way, he did talk a little bit more about that. I'll get to that in just a quick second. But for Brian, and by the way, maybe this is semantics, but they've clearly pivoted. I still think the intention is to go sign 25 to 30 high school players every year and try to build through the high school ranks. But the problem is, look at the last two classes. We've talked about this, but the 2023 class that you signed, Christian Braithwaite's gone, Jalen Brown's gone, Ricky Collins is gone, Michael Dartery's gone, Lance Hurd's gone, Jackson Howard's gone, Jeremiah Hughes, Kylan Jackson, Mac Markway, Jackson McGowan, Kamorian Pimpton, Kai Preen, Shelton Sampson. That's 13. Deshaun Womack, Ryan Yates. It's 15 players. It's more than half of your signing class from just a year ago that's gone. And then if you look at the 2024 class, so that just finished their freshman year, look at the ones that are in the portal now. Xavier Atkins is gone. Bernard Causey has entered the transfer portal. Excuse me. Joe Cryer signed and then left. I'm scanning through this quickly. Demyron Johnson's in the portal. Forgive me, I'm looking at the other ones. That's four currently from this class after their freshman year have already entered the transfer portal. So the point being, it's great to say you want to build through the high school ranks and develop and supplement in the portal, but if in 2 years half of your signing classes are gone, then you're basically you're turning over your roster every 2 years. So you have to be more intentional in the transfer portal, which is what they're doing. And that this is another one, and this is a long answer, and I do appreciate Brian Kelly giving this context. Because, and I am going to come back, by the way, to what he said there. He said, he was talking about the financial component just being a necessity, which is true. And LSU's done a good job there. I'm going to give you an update on that here in just a quick second. What Brian Kelly said, then I'm going to add some context to it. But he was asked if the market is impacting his the needs. For example, we've talked about, you need a tight end. The only scholarship tight end you have left on your roster right now is the incoming freshman, J.D. LaFleur. You need tight ends. But does the tight end market impact your needs if there are tight ends in the portal? Anyway, Brian Kelly, this is a long answer. It's about a minute long, but he gave good context. Give a listen.
Our needs will be our needs. And that really, Koki, goes back to, I made it clear that the market was going to be what we needed it for our team. In other words, we were not going to be put in a position that we couldn't get particular players because we were not going to be able to be competitive in the marketplace. So we were going to take care of our needs first. And whatever that was, we were going to have to get into the marketplace and not worry about it. Like anybody else, we want to be able to get value. But unfortunately, there's no salary cap and there's no market analysis by position yet. And you don't have certified agents that have all of that data where they can come in and give you a number that is a reasonable number. So there's back and forth here. But suffice to say that we're going to be in this marketplace and we're going to do what we need to do to fulfill the needs of putting together a roster that is able to compete and win a championship.
Listen to the difference from a year ago. We're going to be in this market and we're going to do what we have to do to fill the needs to build a roster that's going to be able to win a championship. Keep in mind a year ago. So let me just illustrate the difference, not even of a full year ago. Right. This was the spring portal window when Dominic Williams was here. Dominic Williams was LSU needed a defensive tackle. LSU finishes spring. Brian Kelly says point blank, we have got to go address defensive tackle. Okay, that was a need. very clearly stated. The two big names are Dominic Williams, Simeon Barrow. They wanted Dominic Williams transferring from TCU. He wanted $1.2 million. I've shared this with you. Fact check me. $1.2 million was the ask. LSU wasn't going to pay it. LSU was paying. Will Campbell was the highest paid player on the team last year at $500K. They couldn't justify paying a guy who's coming in more than double the amount of the best player, your 3-year starter at left tackle. So they said, we're not paying you that. And so Simeon Barrow was next up, and they went higher because they were pretty desperate. They didn't go as high as Dominic Williams was asking, but they went higher than what Will Campbell was making. And Simeon Barrow landed at Miami. So a year ago, they weren't willing to do what it took to address that position. They added bodies. They added Javier Suggs, and they added Gio Paez. But they went shopping off the bargain rack. What he's telling you now is, we're going to do what needs to be done to compete to win a championship. Now, you have to be smart, meaning you're not going to go give a true freshman early enrollee, reclassifying freshman in Jakeem Stewart $2 million a year for a guy that probably won't even be an impactful player as a freshman. This guy's played one season of high school football, and he's just finished his junior year of high school. Do we really think he's going to be an immediate, stud impact guy worth being the highest paid player on your team? Absolutely not. So take that money, less than $2 million, go in the portal and get you a stud defensive tackle that's played 3 years of college football. That's what they're doing. They're going to spend. Oh, they're going to spend. I've already told you the numbers that I was told LSU spent, the cumulative number that LSU had in the 2024 roster. They will spend more than double and close to 3 times as much on the 2025 roster. They're ready to spend the money. They have the money to spend. Now you just have to reel in those players. Well, I will get to the money answer. Let me grab a quick break. We'll come back. I will get to what Brian Kelly had to say about what the response has been to those NIL comments. A couple more LSU players hit the portal. We'll get to that as we continue Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Y'all, I love Game Time. Maybe you're heading to the Texas Bowl. Maybe that's a great Christmas gift for the LSU fan on your list. You want to give them tickets to the Texas Bowl. Go spend New Year's Eve in Houston, New Year's in Houston. Watch the Texas Bowl, LSU and Baylor. How about you hop on the Game Time app and snag those tickets for LSU and Baylor? Remember, there's no better place to buy your tickets online, no better online ticketing marketplace than Game Time. Game Time picks will show you only the best values on tickets. They have last-minute deals on tickets right up to the start of the event, even an hour after it starts. They have exclusive flash deals, sponsored deals on everything for football and basketball and baseball and concerts and comedy and theater and everything. It's at Game Time. So download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem with the code LOCKEDONCollege. That's LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. One quick follow-up before we talk about the players that hit the portal, including JVR Suggs. But Brian Kelly was asked how the response has been from donors and the collective and so on and fans. Remember, just 1 week ago on signing day, when Brian Kelly was asked about losing Bryce Underwood and Jakeem Stewart and Kate Phillips, and there was the questions about that, and he was pretty point blank. It said, if you want to win, you got to donate. I mean, I'm way oversimplifying what he said, but that was his message, and it continues to be Brian Kelly's message. So he was asked on this teleconference, what has been the response to that sort of that plea last week?
Our needs will be our needs. And that really, Koki, goes back to, I made it clear that the market.
Forgive me. I played the wrong one. Here it is.
It's been a good start. We've got a ways to go. I think we've gotten off to a pretty good start. We've had a combination of generous donors and a grassroots support that has definitely turned itself up and I think answered the call. But we have a ways to go, and we're going to have to be vigilant. We're going to have to continue to look for more of that support and continued support. We're out there, with meetings and showing our plan and what it looks like. But it's been a good start.
I was told, and I've shared this with you before, so I'm not repeating anything I haven't said, but since the Tiger Athletic Foundation took over the fundraising for the collective, where they merged this sort of partnership, and whereby LSU donors can now get TAF priority points for donating to the collective. Every month since, LSU, the collective, vis-a-vis TAF, has raised over $1 million each month since then. And I had one person with deep knowledge of LSU's fundraising situation and the collective and all the things that go into this NIL process and approach for LSU said they're having an awesome month or so in fundraising, even outpacing what they were doing. So, yes, I think the plea Brian Kelly made, I use that term plea loosely, but what Brian Kelly said there on signing day, I think resonated because it was the message that had to come from the coach after watching Michigan swipe Bryce Underwood and watching Jakeem Stewart go to USC and watching Cade Phillips flip on signing day. Now, it's not, I want to repeat this. It's not that LSU didn't have the money or any money. They could have gone up on Cade Phillips. They could have gone up on Jakeem Stewart. But at some point, you have to look and say, is it worth it? We have a finite amount of resources. Let's make sure we're building a complete roster instead of over-committing resources to one player who may not be that big of an impact. Let's take that money and allocate it as a supplemental income, as a surplus to make sure we get the guys we want in the portal. And we've talked about it a little already. LSU's projected to land Barrion Brown, one of the top receivers in the portal. LSU's projected to land Jakeem Jackson, the cornerback out of Florida, who's the former number 3 overall corner in the country, was starting at Florida, but was injured in game 2 and missed the rest of the season. He's projected to come to LSU now. So there's the path. I always say, actions speak louder than words. Don't tell me, show me. And they're showing you with their actions, with keeping Garrett Nussmeier at all costs, with having deep interest already from the top players in the portal and already being a lean to land a receiver and a cornerback, spots that you need and great players that everybody wants. So they're moving in that direction. Now, as we often say, the portal giveth and the portal taketh away. So there are 2 more players, as it comes down to it, that had decisions made on Wednesday. Excuse me. So it was interesting that it started with PJ Woodland. PJ Woodland, Pete Nakos from On3, initially said that reported that PJ Woodland was entering the transfer portal. Well, he reports at LSU that PJ Woodland's entering the transfer portal. Just a few minutes later, PJ Woodland quote tweets him and says, "That's over with." And so Pete Nakos then deletes that tweet to suggest that PJ Woodland is planning to stay at LSU. Now, you might ask, why would PJ Woodland even consider leaving? Remember, you've got Ashton Stamps, an incumbent starter returning. You're going to get Jakeem Jackson out of the transfer portal. For all accounts are you're going to land him out of Florida, and then you landed DJ Pickett. So those are going to be most likely your first 3 guys in 2025. And remember, for PJ Woodland, after the Alabama game, really the second half of the season, his reps decreased dramatically, where he didn't even get double-digit reps in a game in the second half of the season. So he was a guy that played well in spring, had a good fall camp, looked like he was emerging, got a lot of run early, but then right at that halfway point of the season, you saw his playing time drop dramatically. And so you could see the writing on the wall that at best he was going to be your 4th guy, but then you're a turned ankle away. You never know how it's going to go. So, but in any event, PJ Woodland, it appears, is actually staying now, despite that initial report. JVR Suggs, however, is entering the transfer portal. And this one is a little disappointing because Suggs is a guy that had really carved out a role for LSU. And, he when he transferred in from Grand Valley State, wasn't necessarily a guy. He was a must-take because you had to get bodies at that position on the interior defensive line. But what Javier Suggs became was a very good interior pass rusher. As a matter of fact, Pro Football Focus graded him out at an 81.3 on the season as a pass rusher. Against Texas A&M, his grade was a 90.5. Against UCLA, it was 84.7. He was very good. He had 3 sacks on the season. Again, very limited reps. He only played a total of 133 snaps. The most snaps he played in a game was the opener against USC. He played 22 snaps. He played 21 against Nichols and 21 against A&M. Aside from that, 11 against South Alabama, 11 against Oklahoma. Other than that, it was all single-digit snaps. I mean, he was a very specialized player that he was just an interior pass rusher, but he's very effective at doing that. So it's a bummer to lose him, but if he's looking at trying to go be a starter and every down interior player, that's probably not going to happen. I mean, you saw Ahmad Bro and Dom McKinley take those reps. You're getting Jacoby and Guillory back for a 6th season, and you're probably going to get a tackle out of the portal as well. So I sort of understand it with Javier Suggs, but it's disappointing because he had carved out a specialist role on that defensive line. For the Tigers right now, 15 players in the transfer portal. Javier Suggs, the latest. Before that, Kamorian Pimpton, J.K. Johnson, Nathan Dybert, Jordan Allen, Xavier Atkins, Bernard Causey, Jair Brown, Demyron Johnson, Kylan Jackson, Shelton Sampson, C.J. Daniels, Deshaun Womack, Landon Ibieta, and Ricky Collins. That's your list so far. So 15 players in the transfer portal now from LSU, which is about the number you usually see. 15 to 20 from every school generally leave in the portal in a given year. So we'll see where that number lands, if there's any more. But Tigers are getting ready for the bowl game. And by the way, Brian Kelly was asked about participation in that bowl game. You'll hear that next as the Tigers get ready for Baylor. We'll switch gears to talk about what's happened on the field when we return. Locked on LSU, your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need all in one place, in the place where you place live bets on the NFL. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, you can view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Tigers are getting ready to take on Baylor Thursday. LSU will hit the practice field for the first time as they begin this preparation. And Brian Kelly gave his opening thoughts on the Baylor Bears.
I also want to congratulate Baylor and certainly, Dave Aranda and the success that they've had at Baylor this season. I think they've won 6 in a row, playing as well as anybody in the country. So, familiar with Dave, a great football coach. He was part of the LSU championship team. So, a lot of familiarity here and should make for a great game between two teams that are looking to continue momentum going into 2025.
Now, the big question for LSU, as it is every team right now, is, who's going to play? Right? You've already seen Will Campbell declare for the draft, Mason Taylor declare for the draft. We're assuming those guys will not play, that they'll opt out. Now, Garrett Nussmeier was injured against Oklahoma, but in the immediate aftermath of that game, even before we knew a draft decision, Nussmeier said he's got a month to get ready and get healed up and get ready to go play in the bowl game. So we're assuming that. But Brian Kelly did talk about what the expectation is for participation here in the bowl game.
We'll have some of the veterans that will play, and some have certainly made a decision that it's in their best interest not to play in the game. And, we try to provide as much information and I think we're pretty detailed and pretty transparent in terms of what we think is best for each one of our players. Here's what I know. The guys that will be fielding for this team will be 100% committed to getting a positive outcome. They'll be playing because they want to be playing. And that's really the most important thing, right? I mean, that you have a group of players that want to play for LSU and want to play to the standard.
It's interesting because a couple of years ago, we saw the complete contrast of this when LSU played Purdue. And Purdue was without Aiden O'Connell, their starting quarterback. They were without their best receiver. They were without all their best players. And LSU just walloped them. It's similar to what happened when LSU went and played Kansas State in that Texas Bowl. Incidentally, the last time LSU was in the Texas Bowl back in 2021. I mean, LSU went with 38 scholarship players. You had a bunch of walk-ons. You had a receiver playing quarterback, and it was just massively disappointing. So who plays is going to be really interesting. But Tigers hit the practice field for the first time on Thursday. Then Brian Kelly's meeting with the local media on Friday. So we'll have a much better sense of who is out there come Friday. One big question is Garrett Dellinger. Of course, Dellinger was injured against Texas A&M. He missed the backstretch of the season. Just very disappointing. And it's obvious that created a domino effect on the offensive line. Dellinger was so good. You took him out. You put Paul Mabenga in. Significant drop-off. Dellinger lifted up DJ Chester in so many ways and made you a left-handed running team. You weren't able to do that. It was so significant, and it's disappointing for Dellinger, a guy who was such a stalwart starting for parts of 4 seasons, and then he misses the end of the last month of his senior year because of this injury. But Brian Kelly was asked about Dellinger and his availability for the bowl game.
Yeah, I mean, I think physically he'd be able to. I think he's got to make a decision, and he has not yet, whether he's going to forego playing. But Wilson, in terms of the physical, he would be cleared to play.
That's good news if he wants to play. I look at Garrett Dellinger as one of those guys that, and I don't know what he's going to elect to do, but he's one of those that I would assume would play. Dellinger is not a guy that you're anticipating going to the combine or anything like that, testing off the charts, working his way up to a day 2 pick. He's probably a late day 3 guy, maybe a priority free agent, something like that. We'll see what happens with him there, but it's so hard for me to imagine a guy that's committed so much to LSU. And again, I don't know, and he'll make the decision that's best for him. And if he chooses not to play, I respect it and understand. I'd never criticize anybody for that decision. They have to make a personal decision. It's a tough decision, and they'll do what's best for them. And I don't blame them anyway. But I also look at Garrett Dellinger and I go, man, for a guy that went through so much of the crap with Ogeron being fired in the 500 season and everything that followed, and then seeing the ups and the downs, the ebbs and the flows under Kelly, the beating Alabama, the Jaden Heisman season, and the disappointments of like losing all your openers while he was here, and the disappointing loss this year to Alabama with so much on the line, and et cetera. Even the disappointing loss to Florida that he had to sit and watch. Does he really want to go out with an injury in that Texas A&M game? I don't know. I certainly can't speak for Garrett Dellinger, but boy, if he's healthy, able, and ready, sure love to see him give it a go. There's another gigantic question mark, which is wide receiver, tight end, right? So we'll see if the veterans are going to play. But remember, Kyron Lacey is out of eligibility. Interested to see if he plays. CJ Daniels is already in the transfer portal. Mason Taylor's going pro. So that's 3 of your top 4 receivers that you presume are not going to be there. Aaron Anderson would be back, but then also at tight end, Kamorian Pimpton's in the transfer portal and Mason Taylor's going pro. You don't have a tight end. So Brian Kelly was asked, like, what do you do at receiver and tight end in this game?
You have to be able to, get your team ready. And if you have to make some adjustments in terms of, what you do with your scheme, then you make those adjustments. And we're prepared to do so. Our offense is about the players, not the plays. And so, if we don't have a particular player, we get rid of that play and we highlight the players within the scheme. So we'll just do it a little bit differently, but we'll still be able to get the job done.
It is worth mentioning that specifically with tight end, one thing we've seen a lot this year is Bo Bordelon play tight end. Of course, Bo Bordelon is an offensive lineman at LSU, but there's times they put the 89 jersey on him and put him on the field as an extra blocker. So now look, you're very predictable by personnel because Bo Bordelon's not going to catch passes, but that is an option. You could move Trey Green back to tight end. He could get the start, and now he's not going to help you much in the blocking game, as we well know. But as Brian Kelly said, the offense is for players, not plays. If they have plays that they don't have the players to run, then they're not going to run those plays. So you feature the guys that you do have, and we'll see what impact that may have on LSU on New Year's Eve against Baylor. But again, the Tigers hit the practice field for the first time on Thursday, start getting ready for the Baylor Bears. And I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but if you've ever heard me talk about, especially in this era with bowl games, the great benefit of a bowl game is not the opportunity to go play and win a bowl game, the reward of a season, that none of that exists anymore. this is an opportunity for basically a pre-spring practice. I mean, all the players that you're losing, this isn't, think about a year ago. Jaden opted out of the bowl game. So Nussmeier is getting the opportunity to play for the first time. Spring was an opportunity, bowl practice was an opportunity for Garrett Nussmeier to be the man for a dozen practices, to take every rep with the ones, to lead the huddle, to break the huddle, to run the offense, to play in a game, all of that as a precursor to spring football. And then he got all the reps in spring and then all the reps in fall camp. And now it's played a season. So that the bowl practice is so significant, like with Campbell and Jones and Dellinger and Frazier, we'll see which offensive linemen come back, but whoever it's going to be, let's say Will Campbell doesn't play. Okay, well, if it's Tyree Adams at left tackle, what an amazing opportunity for Tyree Adams to take every rep at left tackle with the ones when that's been Will Campbell for 3 years. Well, now he can go get all these reps in the dozen practices with the ones at left tackle and play a game. He's not going to be Will Campbell. No one's expecting that. But it's a precursor to spring and an opportunity right there. So, maybe, we'll see on the defensive side of the ball. Do Savion Jones and Braden Swinson play? Both are out of eligibility. They could both still play in this game, and I hope they do. But if not, what an opportunity for Gabe Relaford, for Kalaj Cobb, and some of those young defensive ends to get on the field and give it a go. It may not look great, but it's experience, which is invaluable. So we'll see. But it's one of the really interesting parts. It's different, but it is interesting to see. Maybe a little exciting to see some of those young guys give it a go here, these bowl practices, and on New Year's Eve against Baylor. All right, that's going to do it for us here on today's episode of Locked On LSU. Thanks so much for making us your first listen. We appreciate you everydayers who are here with us on Locked On LSU. Just sincerely appreciate the growth, man. It's been awesome. Hey, thanks for making us your first listen. Now for your second listen, how about you go check out Locked On SEC with our guy Chris Gordy, available on YouTube and however you get podcasts. If you are listening on podcast, thank you so much. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Rate us, leave a review. If you're on YouTube, smash that like button, subscribe to the channel. Hit the bell so you're notified whenever we post a new video. As always, one of the fastest ways to help us grow is to leave your comments below. And let a friend know they love the Tigers. We got you every day for Locked On LSU, your team every day.